And the thing about those rules is whether you call it a reward, a gift, an unconditional gift, doesn't matter what you call it. If there was an arrangement like that, it would be taxable.
One way or another, so much of politics centres on tax. Who pays it? How much? And what does the government spend it on? And sometimes it's personal. The Conservatives are now calling for HMRC to investigate whether Nigel Farage should have paid tax on a £5 million gift from the billionaire based in Thailand, Christopher Harborne. The question, say the Tories, is whether the payment was designed to compensate Mr. Farage for running as an MP. Sometimes in politics, tax is framed as a moral as well as political issue. For example, a letter signed by over 100 patriotic millionaires, they call themselves, including Gary Lineker, has been released urging Andy Burnham and his new government to tax the wealthy more. These particular members of the super-rich club say they would willingly pay a wealth tax. Would that yield serious revenue, or would it prompt an exodus of successful investors and entrepreneurs from our shores? Well, it's a great day to talk tax with a real tax expert, Dan Neidle, and luckily he joins me now. Dan, welcome to the Times at One. First off, can we start with the Farage story? I know you've looked at it pretty closely. Are you convinced by the grounds that the Conservatives are claiming to suggest that HMRC should be closely looking at the £5 million that Mr. Farage has always described as an unconditional gift from Christopher Harborne?
So when this was first revealed, we looked at it in some detail and concluded that if indeed it was an unconditional gift, then it probably wasn't taxable. Even if it was thanking Farage for his political work of the past, for a bunch of rather tedious technical reasons, we thought there'd be no tax. But then there's this recent Guardian report based on anonymous sources, 3 anonymous sources, I should say, that said that the gift was about a month after Mr. Farage had discussions with senior Reform people saying that Mr. Farage would return to frontline politics and being the leader of Reform, but only if he received £5 million. Well, if in fact the £5 million from Mr. Harborne was part of an arrangement to provide Mr. Farage with money so that he'd come back into politics, that changes everything. And it probably then is taxable under a horribly complicated set of rules called the disguised remuneration rules. And the thing about those rules is whether you call it a reward, a gift, an unconditional gift, doesn't matter what you call it. If there was an arrangement like that, it would be taxable.
It would be hard to prove, wouldn't it?
Probably not. I mean, if you've got three witnesses to that meeting, if any of them come forward or if it was documented in any way, then HMRC would be able to establish it. And it's not like a criminal trial, which they have to establish beyond reasonable doubt. They just need to show on balance that likely happened. And HMRC has quite impressive powers to demand documents from people. You probably don't want to be on the other end of an HMRC investigation.
Well, what would the implications for Mr. Farage be if HMRC did get involved and did indeed conclude ultimately that for all the complexities you've just outlined, that ultimately there was tax to be paid? Would it be just a simple case of Farage having to pay the tax that HMRC said he should have paid in the first place, or would it be more serious than that?
Well, it would be messier than that because he was a director of the Reform UK company. It was a different company then from what it is now, but that company still exists. And that company would have a PAYE liability. In other words, it was Mr. Farage's employer. It should have withheld the tax in the same way any employee gets tax withheld by the employer. And Reform UK would have a bill of about £3 million. If they didn't pay it, then most of that would then be assessed on Mr. Farage directly.
Yeah, this will play out over some time, I imagine.
We may never know because HMRC investigations are confidential. HMRC is not allowed to tell anyone what's going on. And it only becomes public if someone at Reform tells us, or if it ends up being appealed in front of a public tribunal, which I think is very unlikely. So we may never know.
I want to switch focus, stay with tax, but switch focus. You will have seen that a whole bunch of very wealthy people in the UK, figurehead leader of the group being Gary Lineker, have said that it is time for them to be taxed more. They say it's both a moral and political question, and that there are many, many rich people who would like to see the government introduce a wealth tax. I think it was mooted at coming in over wealth of £10 million. And the suggestion is it would raise serious money and give new Prime Minister Andy Burnham a whole range of new political options. Do you believe that? I mean, do you believe it would work and that it would be a significant revenue earner?
So wealth taxes have been tried numerous times in recent history, and they pretty much all failed. There's never been a wealth tax quite like the one proposed now, which is very heavy and very concentrated on a small number of very wealthy people.
Well, there's different ideas out there. Which one are you referring to when you say very heavy?
Well, the one which Patriotic Millionaires, the organisation behind that letter, supports is 2% of wealth over 10 million.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the most popular proposal at the moment. There's never been a tax like that in the world. And the reason there hasn't is the extreme sensitivity that tax has to a very small number of people, a few thousand people would pay most of the tax. And those are people who are very wealthy, who have homes all over the world. All they need to do is slightly change their diary to stop being tax resident in the UK and pay no wealth tax at all. So these revenue figures, I think, are a fantasy.
See, we are talking to you because you know plenty about tax, but there are other people who know plenty about tax who disagree with you. I mean, there was a study out the other day which suggested that a wealth tax handled in the right way could raise up to £10 billion. Are you saying that's absolutely nonsensical?
So that was a report which answers some of the problems with the wealth tax I mentioned by saying, OK, let's not tax people with 10 million of wealth. Let's tax people with 100 million or more of wealth. But that's just doubling down on the fundamental problem. You're making it reliant on an even smaller number of people. And it was written by an economist who's supported wealth taxes for decades. If you speak to people with knowledge of how rich people plan their taxes and how rich people react to taxes, the idea that a few thousand people are going to sit around and pay these large taxes is illusory. So the amounts they're saying will be collected, I think, are fictitious. That bothers me less than the potential impact of the tax. If you tax something, you always get less of it. You know, we tax moving house, stamp duty on houses, so people don't move house. If you tax investment, people will invest less. They'll spend more. They'll move their money somewhere else, and that has consequences.
I need a real quick right, Dan. I need a real quick answer to this. One last question, which is, you know, opponents of wealth taxes always say the rich would leave the country as quick as they possibly could. Is there evidence from other parts of the world that does happen, that this mass exodus, speedy mass exodus, does happen?
Right. It's the wrong framing. These are not people like you and me who have a house in the UK and would have to get up, pack their trunks and leave. They're people who spend probably a couple of months in the UK, and ceasing to be tax residents would involve spending a few weeks less in the UK. It's easy for them to do. Don't think of it as moving house.
Right. Dan Neidle, founder of Tax Policy Associates, thank you very much for joining us on The Times at 1.